leaning into your uniqueness is, to me, the number one way to find fulfillment. And so fulfillment to me personally is that success, and then from that fulfillment is the byproduct of the business success.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. Today we're speaking to a company founder that has received numerous entrepreneurship awards, including being named as Forbes 30 Under 30 and receiving an invite to the White House by President Obama to be recognized for his innovations to sports medicine. When recovering from an ankle injury, he became frustrated by the lack of innovation in the healthcare and sports apparel industries. With a background in biomechanical engineering, he set out on a mission to bring the market products that change the paradigm of what apparel can do for the body. Throughout our interview, we dive into some fascinating subjects, including tackling imposter syndrome in the fast-paced of success, how to build a supportive, authentic community around your brand by ignoring what everyone else thinks you should do, and his journey of discovery around money and why he's no longer attached to it for his fulfillment. So please welcome Mr. Partha Unnava, the CEO and founder of Lasso, to the Escape Your Limits podcast.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to be here and grateful for the experience.
It was quite funny that the guest that will probably have gone out last week, Oliver, we were in his house up on some hill, and you sort of turned up as we were very, very late running over in the podcast, and you were meant to be going out for dinner with him. Yeah,
absolutely. And nothing's by accident, right? And through Oliver, I always feel like he's one of those guys that great people are always around him. So every time I go to hang out with him, I meet someone else I like.
How did you connect with him and your business then?
We met through a mutual friend a couple years back, and it was right after I'd moved to LA and I was starting to get into the scene here, and he introduced us, and we kind of hit it off as friends first, and then the business element came a little bit later. And since then it's just been a pleasure to be able to spend time with him. He's just such a great guy.
Yeah. I was reading some of your blogs and posts, and I was sort of reading a part where you actually met Mr. Obama. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. When I was doing my first business, it was a medical device company, and we were making a new type of crutch that doesn't hurt your underarms. And so, kind of a combination of the European forearm crutch that you probably saw growing up, with the underarm crutch just not shoving force into your nerves, putting it against the side of your body and distributing it better. So that product, I had gotten invited to the White House for an event and just randomly got put back in a special situation to meet the president and talk to him about the product, and he used it and carried it, and it was nuts. I was like 20 at the time.
Really?
Yeah.
Was that quite a sort of a key experience in your life? Did that have an impact? Because when I was reading, I think it was on Medium, and you mentioned something about how that kind of got you to think in terms of what happiness meant to you.
Yeah. I mean, what was unique about it is that I had dropped out of college to start that business. And so my social life at that point was still that of a college student, right? And after going there and coming back, I was put through a huge media gauntlet. And my peers didn't look at me the same way. My friends didn't look at me, the same way. And I was seen as probably a lot more successful than I deserved to be seen as at the time, right? Just because of circumstances. And so I had a lot of trouble reconciling all of that. And I'm a very spiritually driven person. I care a lot about who I spend my time with, who I build businesses with. And that really got me started thinking about that at a young age, because I experienced that disconnect, that isolation. And I was like, well, this is definitely not what I want for the rest of my life. I got to figure out how to get through this.
Right. Yeah. Did that, when you said you had that success then, was there, sounds like it was a combination of sort of, was it a case of like, did you feel as though you were meant to be in that position? Like you deserved it, or was there a sort of a question mark of like, or was it something different that you were experiencing?
For sure. Huge imposter syndrome. It's like, we hadn't gone far enough down the path where it felt like I had built enough success to warrant that exposure, but I kind of felt like a lot of things coincided. There was a good narrative going on. I was a good person in that situation to represent the narrative of that event, for political reasons. And obviously, the president he's a great guy. I enjoyed the time meeting him, but I understood kind of what I was there for and the role that I played and what the event was for. So it was, interesting to be a part of that. But I think it's kind of like fame in general is a very fickle thing. It's not something we control. It's more based on what society wants to care about at any given time. And in that era, it was 3D printing and it was youth entrepreneurship. And I just happened to be a good face for that.
Right. What do you think about fame? Like, you know, obviously we were chatting to Oliver last week and it was an interesting conversation with him about how he deals with it and some of the sort of ups and downs in his life caused by having that sort of, you know, relatively quick fame. What's your thoughts of it? Because I suppose nowadays everybody wants to be a famous social media person. They want some kind of fame, and I suppose everyone's in their own little ways are creating their own personal brands and television channels and stuff like that. What's your experience after being through that, and I suppose, you know, spending time with people that have been, you know, in that position?
Yeah, I think there's two types of fame. There's the kind that, you know, you advertise yourself, and there's the kind where other people want to advertise you. I think Oliver is the latter, where his industry combined with his success and the kind of guy he is makes other people want to talk about him, want to bring him up, want to, you know, share his story, and whether it's in media or modeling or whatever he's doing. I think that kind of fame is very unique, and it's just a certain person at a certain time who looks a certain way, who fits, you know, in that industry. Whereas the influencer side of things is people who spend a lot of time telling you what you should know about them, right? And that, I think that can get draining for anybody to have to do that for an extended period of time. And some people are kind of cut for it personality wise, and nothing wrong with that. But I think that it's really, really challenging to chase fame. And especially from a financial standpoint, it's usually not that profitable either. It's usually, you know, you start down that path, you lose a lot of happiness, you get kind of isolated in terms of how you're actually looking at your business or looking at your values within the context of the people around you, and, you know, measuring your worth or your success by what other people attribute to you is almost like the fastest way to lose control over your life, because you don't control what other people think. But when you build systems of people and you build, you know, organizations, or in Oliver's case, where it's kind of like what I would call earned fame, where he played a role really well in a movie or in some sort of media or entertainment property, and that was distributed in a meaningful way that people looked up to and respected whatever he stood for, and that's a totally different thing. That's not chased. That's a byproduct of what he does for a living, right? So I think it's very, very tough, especially in today's society. We see so much, I would consider it mental illness with relation to social media. We were just talking about this because I just stepped off of social media for a little bit, and, you know, you see so many people struggle with it. And for me, it was over the last year, I was just asking, is this necessary for my business to grow? And, you know, with the algorithm changes, with privacy changes, I just feel like what social media is in our lives is really up for question at this point. Is it that critical to, you know, our overall success? And, you know, I wanted to see.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I suppose it's a relatively new thing. So you've had this, I guess, the younger people that have caught on quite early and have been doing it for many years, and now the sort of bigger businesses are getting involved and realizing it's quite important. And then people like yourself that have been through that are now thinking, well, actually, look, I'm gonna, as I said off camera, I couldn't find your Instagram account, and you told me that you've closed it down. And from what I understood, you had a pretty successful following. So as an entrepreneur and someone that I suppose does, you know, leads people and needs to be promoting your brand, do you feel so far that that the social media element is not critical to what you're trying to do as an entrepreneur, or are you still not really figured that out yet?
Yeah, I think for me, within the context of the brand we're building, it's not critical, because I don't want our brand to be about me at all. Our brand is about movement. It's about the fact that movement is critical to living a full and complete and happy life. And it's about enabling movement and inspiring people to go out and do something every single day. Even within our company, we have now a 2-mile walk every day challenge. And it's easy, it's attainable, but any level of movement gives back to your body and to your mind in super huge and meaningful ways. And I think as a society, we kind of lost that when we all stayed inside during COVID. And so we want to be a part of that. And so in that narrative, there's no element of it where putting my story into it is going to contribute, because I'm not known as like a national leader for that, right? Mm-hmm. So for me, it kind of felt like trying to run and build a narrative around myself at the same time that we're building around the brand was just confusing and mixing things in terms of, who I am versus who the company is. Plus, I do things like, I make music for a passion, but I actually release it too, right? And like, I am very artistic, I'm very creative, and I really like a lot of the other things I do. I invest in different things, right? So if I have kind of all these other hats that I wear that keep me well-rounded and complete as a person, that's also additionally confusing to the brand that I'm building for a consumer, for anybody else coming in. So for me, that was kind of the conclusion, is this isn't necessary, and also it's to an extent detracting from what I'm trying to build overall.
Right. So tell us about Lasso. First thing, how did you come up with the name? And then secondly, what essentially is it that you set out to achieve when you founded the business?
So Lasso is your tool. It's what you use every day to keep your body working and moving. And the idea behind the brand, I actually started after I broke my ankle playing basketball, and I went through this recovery and rehab experience. And essentially what I found was that there are no products really designed for us to wear or use on a day-to-day basis that help improve how our bodies work, unless they're bulky, ugly, terrible medical devices. And I experienced like taping, K-tape and regular taping, and bracing in my recovery process. And both I felt were just not great solutions for the long term. Taping because it wears off, according to most studies, in 30 minutes in terms of its effectiveness. Bracing because it just doesn't fit in most shoes. It's just not a thing you want to use every day. So my view was there's this philosophy of native design in technology, and that's how do you design something so it fits seamlessly into the existing systems that people are living in or working through. And for me, what do people do every day, and how can I create a product that integrates into their habits that improves their musculoskeletal health? And in this process, I created a technology that uses textile properties within compression garments to simulate a lot of the benefits of taping. So the idea is that you pull our socks up, which are our core product right now, and you get the benefits of having put K-tape around your foot or your ankle. So you get improved proprioception, improved coordination, improved balance, and you get benefits from a lot of foot and ankle conditions from a pain relief standpoint and a recovery standpoint as well. So the product is designed not just as a recovery or rehab tool, but also as a performance and kind of daily wear tool, because there's no change here. You wear socks every day. If you wear a Lasso sock, it's only increasing the neuromuscular connection and helping you activate more of your muscles, ligaments, and tendons than you would with a regular sock. And so when we started this company and made the product, within 2 or 3 weeks, it was on NFL fields, a couple months later in the NBA. And so we had this very, very rapid building in the pro sports world. A bunch of athletes came on board and invested and helped me get it off the ground. And then from there, facilities like Duke Medical Center started using it to treat foot and ankle injuries. And a bunch of top physicians in the space came on board and started helping us build that side of the brand. So we're very unique in that we're probably the only clothing brand that is, first of all, a class 1 medical device in terms of the functionality, but also all through the fall, we were on all these gift guides as one of the most stylish gifts you can buy for your friend or for your dad or for your mom. And the reason is that we found this nice intersection of form and function. And the way I describe it to people is, it's like the iPhone was when you had, this mess of technology and you simplified it, made it beautiful, and actually made it accessible. So the person using the technology doesn't even think they're using technology. They're just having an experience. And musculoskeletal health and taking care of your body can be the same way. And that's what we're doing at Lasso.
So have you found it's been difficult to define and position exactly what you are? You mentioned a fashion brand, and I've listened to some of your podcasts where you've mentioned that you're going to be the next Adidas or Nike. So do you see yourself as sort of like a sports apparel or like you say, a medical rehabilitation device, or is it just this new category that doesn't yet exist?
Yeah, it's a new category. Ultimately, what I love about Nike and Adidas, I grew up on these brands. They're aspirational, they're inspirational to me, and they were empowering my whole childhood. I remember watching Nike ads for motivation to be able to study or do my work or go do a workout if I didn't feel like it. And that always held with me, the brand power that they had to help me change my behavior and improve my life. But they made a lot of promises from a product standpoint that I don't feel the products deliver on, because you just can't in the regular apparel or garment world. And so bringing my background, which is in biomedical engineering, to the table, I saw a way that I could take a lot of these branding and marketing elements and, set the tone, but also deliver on that promise from a product standpoint.
Right. So from a intellectual property perspective then, like I've not worn the sock, but it looks on the surface like a sock, and then I've seen the zones that you explain on your website. Have you been able to get any protection on that? Because I guess people like Nike and Adidas can probably come up, or will probably look at, if it takes off, different versions of it. So how are you building some kind of like protection around it? Is it through IP, or is it just through the company strategy of how you develop other things?
For sure. Yeah. We have patents essentially around, there's several layers, but it's around the concept of using your clothes to activate your muscles, ligaments, and tendons. And so the compression technology we're doing, the way that I equate it is that taping used science to create a body benefit, right? But taping uses adhesion on the skin to deliver that benefit. We've essentially changed the delivery mechanism. So the science is the same, the benefits are the same, but now it's delivered through your garment instead of you having to apply it, learn how to apply it, etc. And the impact is so significant, to your point on Adidas, Nike, etc. The former GM of Nike Women's is an investor. One of our advisors and investors is the former CEO of Reebok and former CMO of Adidas. So we built kind of that pull in the industry, and we've seen even on the distribution side, many of the major players who used to distribute Nike or Adidas are starting to pick up Lasso.
Right. So I'm thinking about this from a person that's got an idea for a product. What was the process for you? So and just sort of talk us through the steps. So you've obviously got a background in design, quite specific to this kind of area. How did that look like? You kind of had an idea. You wanted to create this sock. I'm sorry, I'm not calling it just this sock.
Totally, yeah.
and then talk us through what happened, and how did it go from sort of like, oh, I think this is a great idea, to being able to, like you say, get it in the NFL. What were some of those sort of key milestones that maybe people could learn from if they had a great idea and how to take it somewhere?
Absolutely. I think the process is, for me, it was pretty straightforward just because it was very clear what I wanted to do. And I think when a lot of people make products, they're not exactly sure where they want to get yet with it. And that's where a lot of the time is. And so I was able to immediately sit down and say, this is exactly what I want. This is where, the support needs to be. This is the actual measurable amount of support I need. Then it was an iterative process with a factory to be able to build a program that works on the machines that make socks to be able to manufacture at that volume. Over the 4 years we've been in business, we've been able to iterate and improve. Now we've been able to get to 100% recycled yarn. So we're totally sustainable, and the efficacy of the product is better than it's ever been before. So just that improvement over time, it is what it is. That's how you become great. But the starting point was knowing what I wanted to get to, and then finding partners who are in the ecosystem who are willing to bet on me. And so that conversation with the factories, that takes some time. I had to, travel at the start of the business. We were manufacturing in China. So traveling to the factory, sitting down with them, explaining it, and you have the language barrier. You have to, go through the process and do the dirty work. But we were able to then bring it back to the States. And, once the language barrier got cleared up, we were able to then take it up a whole nother notch. And then after that, I brought on a chief product officer who has experience in the space, spent 12 years making socks. And so he was able to take it up a whole nother notch because he had a whole different language he was able to use with the factories that I didn't even have. And so it's a process, right? But I think that there's a big gap between the people who are in a field who actually experience the benefits of the product and the people who make those products, in terms of really understanding the true needs of the user. And in many, many fields and industries, especially in our world, right, in health, fitness, and wellness, there are so many products that can be improved meaningfully with very simple solutions.
Thank you for supporting the Escape Your Limits podcast. If you're thinking about creating a unique and engaging fitness space to take your fitness to the next level, then we have you covered. Escape Fitness design and manufacture some of the most innovative, attractive, and durable functional training and free weight equipment used by many of the best trainers and fitness brands across the globe. As a valued listener, we are offering you a 10% discount off many of the products on our website. You can check out the full range by going to escapefitness.com and use the code dumbbell. That's escapefitness.com using the code dumbbell. That's it from me. Please enjoy the rest of this interview.
When I was doing my research on Oliver, I came across your product, and I thought, I remember sitting in my apartment looking at my socks, and I'm like, socks, like for years you just put these on and they're a commodity that you just go out and buy, and yet someone's created this whole brand and business around socks. I didn't realize there's so much into them, but then as you've explained it, taking a very simple idea and thinking of other uses for it is, it's stupidly simple, but it's genius at the same time.
Yeah, and in our industry too, there's this overlap between health, wellness, and medical, and
right.
We're in this era right now, and I'm not sure if a lot of health and wellness folks are super aware of this, but most of what the healthcare industry uses to treat musculoskeletal health, which, just to scope this problem out, 50% of adults in the US have musculoskeletal health conditions each year. $1 trillion market. There is a ton of room to innovate. This entire sector of products, it's called durable medical equipment in the healthcare field. Its reimbursement levels have dropped so low, hospitals don't even want to deal with it. So the only places you can buy that stuff, patients are referred to Amazon, Walgreens, CVS. So if you're anybody who has any desire to innovate in the health and wellness field, there is so much room here. There's so much space, and all it requires is, a commitment to, one, know what problem you want to solve, but two, actually give it a little bit of TLC, like give it a little feeling, give it a little love, and you'll stand out because your competitor is, 3M making braces, right? Like nobody's even close in this industry.
Yeah, and it applies. I've seen it in all different industries. Even what we've done, in our business is taking a basic thing and just adding. No major. I'm not saying you haven't done major innovation, but just changing the aesthetics and the way it's packaged and making it actually appealing.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't have to necessarily invent the next iPhone to be able to create an interesting business. So yeah, there's some interesting ideas there. I wanted to talk about finance because. When we started our business, we kind of went down the organic route, mainly because nobody would lend us any money. And so we just had to kind of figure it out and kind of buy and hope that the gap between the terms we got from our suppliers and people paying us kind of figured itself out, and we managed to expand, but quite a tricky way of doing it. I understand you went down a different route, which is you went out and raised money. So what was that like, and what did you learn from the process in terms of, you had this product? Did you get advice? How much did you know how much to borrow? Tell us a bit about that process.
Totally. So my first time approaching VCs, I was actually in college raising money for that crutch business. So I have been pitching VCs for 10 years now, since I was 19, and it's hard till it's easy, and it's like many things in life. So you really have to first understand tone in your market and what kind of the different subgroups are that exist. And if you look around, just like in life, you have all these different cultures, all these different people. We were just talking about this strip from all the way up through Orange County. Each beach has its own different culture, different vibe. Every single group of VCs is like that, and there's certain funds that work together. There's certain kind of ecosystems that you start to see. And so it's, to me, I think the biggest thing is don't read the news. Stop reading TechCrunch. Like, that is not reality, and it's going to mess up the way that you pitch. But focus on what is really the core differentiator that helps you stand out. What are you trying to do? And find the people you resonate with from a values perspective and participate in that community. It doesn't mean ask right away, but it means talk to people, learn what's going on, find people you like just the fact that we met, right? Like in our ecosystem, maybe we'll do a deal together, maybe we'll invest in another company together, right? But it's so community centric at the end of the day that I think a lot of founders miss out on the relationship cultivation part of raising capital, which is you have to participate in a community and build a reputation over a number of years that you're trustworthy, that you care about it, that you're actually going to last before people want to invest in you. And just like building a brand, I'm sure you felt this right off the bat, there's a few years before people really feel that you belong in that community. And up until that point, you're a newcomer. And for me, the magic point is about 3 or 4 years into something. I don't know if it's like a memory thing, if it sinks into kind of your subconscious and things just start to feel familiar after a certain point. Maybe it's a certain number of exposures, but there is a point when you run down that fundraising lane where all of a sudden you kind of belong in that community. And then it's almost backward. It's almost like people are reaching out to you to find a way to get involved in what you're doing. And to me, it was never related to traction. It was never related to progress. It was just due to maturation, sophisticated thinking, and just allowing time to happen and progress.
You've got some interesting investors. Was it quite strategic when you went out looking for them that you wanted to have a particular, did you have kind of a brief to say, like, this is the type of person I want, as opposed to just going for where the money was?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of picked 3 categories. One was industry, so sports industry side. One was pro athletes and pro sports. And the third was the medical side. So, industry side, mentioned a few of those. Pro sports side, we got some athletes. We got a major team owner as well. And on the medical side, we got a bunch of physicians in our space that are some of the leading experts. And so, I think we're fortunate to have a product. Our core strategy from day one has been send a pair of socks. Usually that gets an investment from an investor, and so if it doesn't, it's not the right investor for us. And I think when you really care about your product and you really put that, love into making sure it's quality, and I think like you have to be a builder about it. You have to be a craftsman. Like you have to really actually care. That should be where your pride comes from, not from the money raised, not from the employee count, but from the thing that you make. Then that really stands out. And I think just getting the product in the right circles, things can happen very quickly.
I think that's a really interesting point you make, and something I've spent a lot of time thinking about. But I think you're right. If you've got a product that you really believe and see is the best that you can do, and you're proud of it, the selling and the pitching and everything else just seems to, you don't need to learn any skills or anything like that. It just happens, if you've put everything into it. And I think that's I've read a few books about it. I think there's a very old book called Purple Cow, and it's just, look, just go out and create good shit.
Yeah.
And everything else will sort of, you make the best product you can do, and it seems to come together.
Yeah, and I would also add, even from the materials you had sent me on the podcast, looking through the website, seeing the deck you just showed me now, the way you communicate matters a lot. Like, how professional do you conduct yourself? How clean is your materials? Do you care about the angles of the photos? Do you care about the lighting in the photos? Every single little detail you're able to focus on and put into the mix really shows at the end of the day. And it's not, for me, it's like, it's not just about, all right, we hired a marketing agency, check. It's about actually caring. And I think like when you meet great entrepreneurs and see great businesses, it's 100% people who care way, way more about what they do than how much they make doing it.
Yeah, I would agree. So what about when you managed to raise that money, like what were the first sort of 4 or 5 people that you brought on board, and why?
Right off the bat, it was, kind of from the crutch business transition over, the first major investor was Champ Bailey. He's a Hall of Fame football player here. He came on just full passion for the product, and it made sense to me, just obviously because of status. I feel like that one's pretty cut and dry. He introduced me to a few of his peers, other athletes as well. We did kind of a gift box set to a bunch of NFL players, and then a few of those chose to invest as well. So that's kind of how we got going on that side. On the flip, I had been kind of getting connected into various sports industry circles. So that's kind of where I started to bring on a few of those. And from the crutch business, I knew a lot of orthopedic surgeons. And so when some of them started seeing our ads, some of the surgeons I already knew, one of them reached out, and then we started to have a few more once, we started to get known in that circle, reach out as well. You end up on somebody's LinkedIn page, everybody sees the update, and it changes pretty quickly, right? And so it was, to your point earlier, it was extremely organic. It didn't feel like that intentional process. It was intentional from the standpoint of we knew what we wanted, we knew what we were looking for, and those people just happened to find us.
And was in terms of, did you also recruit people that you didn't have within the organization, or did you have sort of a team already in place when you started it?
So when I started, it was me and two other friends. So, super, bootstrapped kind of vibe, like very from the ground, right? And over time, we were able to get some really sophisticated leaders into the business. So first, I had looked to bring on somebody who could help me professionalize the company. Through him, I met a CMO whose our CMO now is this guy, Scott. His entire background's in action sports. He's a founder. He's built a brand. He exited it. He's done that a few times. He's been highly successful with the actual crafting process of a brand. But what I love about him is that he understands the core of what makes a brand resonate. So it's not just about what it looks like or feels like. And I think in this VC-backed brand age, which, I would feel just kind of is wrapping up here when Facebook was so cheap relative to main ads. So people threw hundreds of millions of dollars into brands. That whole ecosystem was not focused on what the brand was actually doing or building. And so, we had a lot of health and wellness brands. I'm not going to call anybody out right now, but a lot of brands that weren't necessarily doing their due diligence in terms of the quality of their products. And so I feel that there will be a lot of, kind of adverse health effects as a result of the way that we put money into the market in this category over the last decade. I think that, now, as I look at great brand builders, they care about core, they care about lifestyle, they care about who is the person that stands for what this brand stands for. And the number one priority is those people, that community has to always use this brand. So the brand can never get mainstream too quickly. And I think from a venture standpoint, that makes brands not a great investment, especially great brands, right? But mediocre brands are a great investment because you can get it into 3,000 endpoints immediately, get that thing out to private equity, get your money, right? And I think it really depends what you want to do. But if you really care about building a brand for, that the core why of, hey, I believe this should exist. I believe it should stand for something, kind of like a Patagonia, for example. I think they're one of the best brands ever built. You have to know that it's going to be a long ride. And even Patagonia is a brand that they limit their growth every year. They've limited it for years. And it's because they just don't believe in, they don't do Black Friday. They don't believe in consumerism, and they're willing to lose the money for it. So money has to be your second priority if you really want to build a great brand. And I was able to find executives from the space who stood for that and believed in that and were willing to defer, cash outcomes for that reason.
So how did you deal with investors then? Because I suppose if you invest in a business, I suppose people want to see how they're going to get their money back. Well, my guess, although I did have a conversation last week with Oliver, and he said there are different investors, some that just want to put it in and that's it, and some that want to make money. So did you again, coming back to the choice, need to find people that were prepared to sort of wait whilst that brand was building, and I guess reinvest for quite some time before they would actually sort of see any of that coming back?
Yeah, exactly right. And people who just wanted to build with me, people who, connected with me on a human level and were like, hey, like if I spend, the next 5-10 years working with you, that would be nice. That is really what I was looking for and what I was able to find with most of our financial backing. I mean, I would say anyone that I interact with heavily from our investor base is someone it's a true pleasure, and our whole investor base is great. Nobody gives me problems, but there's just some I just don't get to talk to too much. Right. But yeah.
So what interesting, because that sounds like a wonderful investor. And I don't know how many of those are out there, but what is it then about your brand, do you think, or you, that causes people to say, look, I think it's a great idea. I want to invest in it and be involved because I enjoy it. What do you think is the sort of thing that you did or communicated to get people to sort of buy into what is not, I suppose, a common way of pitching a business?
Yeah, I think I set expectations. I do this better every year too. So I mean, obviously I haven't done it perfectly, but set expectations really honestly. And I work on that every week, every year. Like, how can I be more honest with myself? And then as a result, everyone around me. So, being able to say to an investor in your pitch, you might make less money in this deal than in that deal that you're doing. That's fine. This is not a deal, purely for making money. This is a deal for impact. And I've been very clear since day one. The only reason I'm building this business, if I wanted to make money, there's a lot of ways I can make money. This is not the most efficient way for me to make money in my life. And I've been very clear with everybody that has ever talked to me about it from a financial standpoint. That's not what I'm in it for. I'm in it because I truly feel that I'm probably the only one who has the technical expertise plus the empathy kind of side of me from a brand perspective. Both my parents are marketing professors, so I grew up around this. So having both sides, that's a very, very unique thing. And I just felt like I was perfectly positioned in this society to be able to make this change. And I think that, you know, when you really look at how our society is structured, it comes down to a handful of people every generation that make meaningful and great change that impacts society in a positive way. And I wanted to be one of those people. And people who aligned with that message of, hey, I want to be involved with a brand that is positively pushing society, they were the ones who invested. And I think, you know, when you get beyond a certain wealth level, there's some people who invest purely for return. Invest in real estate if you're that person, you know, put it in crypto, put it in NFT, buy a monkey, right? Like that stuff. But if you're really, really focused on the why, then the investment philosophy that I've noticed is one that's more, I heard Elon Musk say this in an interview. He said the way he looks at investments is that every place he puts his dollar is a vote he's putting into society of what is valuable and should exist in the future. And with the scale of money he's playing with, obviously his vote is quite large, but even on a smaller level, that's how I feel too. If I put a few of my dollars here, a few of my dollars there, well, why would I put it in a company I don't believe in just to make money? If I put my dollars in a company I believe in, then I'm actively voting with my dollars what I believe the future of our society should be. And I've met a lot of people that think that way.
What have you done about building the community or the tribe as part of the story that you're telling now? Is that part of building that community and that following? Because it certainly seems from what I know that you're starting to build that people of these sort of passionate fans that really believing it, and I guess that's an aspiration for any business, is to be able to achieve that. So what are you doing, and what would you say some of the key steps that maybe people could, I guess, consider and think about maybe trying to apply in whatever they're doing?
Yeah. First and foremost, we show up. So, you know, events, tournaments, whatever it might be, we're there. And when we show up, we bring like our whole team. So we're loud and we're there. So we were at a pickleball tournament this past fall. Pickleball loves Lasso socks, the sport of pickleball does. And they made us the official sock of a couple of the leagues that are in the sport. So one of them is this league called the PPA. They get broadcast on ESPN, and they had their big tournament in Vegas last year. And we showed up, you know, it was 9 or 10 of us. And I mean, we cheer like it's football, and they love it because they don't want the sport to be super dry and boring, like, you know, tennis can tend to be from time to time, right? So they're like, these players in pickleball, they don't just come from tennis, they come from hockey, they come from basketball, they come from everywhere. And so they wanted to create more of a fun environment. And so we endorse a mother-daughter duo. The daughter, Anna Lee, is the #1 player in all of pickleball, #1 woman, and she's 15. And her mom and her win doubles like every single time. She wins singles almost every single time. And so we go there and we cheer our faces off, and she loves it. She comes over, she tells us, hey, this opponent of mine gets in her head, cheer for her. Like, cheer really loudly when she makes a mistake, right? And we do it. And the opponents get really frazzled, they get upset. The entirety of the stadium sometimes cheers against us because we're being so loud and disruptive, and we're okay. The stronger somebody who doesn't resonate with the type of people we are is disliking us, that means the stronger that people who resonate with us like us. And so we opt for polarization through authenticity in every context possible. We're not going to sit here and try to be politically correct. We just don't care. If you don't like us, you don't like us. If you do, you do. And if you do, you know, we're going to do everything we can to support you no matter what it does, you know, for us.
I like that. I guess it's sort of natural to try and, like, look, I don't want to offend anyone, and particularly nowadays, you can offend people without even knowing it.
I know, right?
So it's nice to sort of to hear what you're saying. It's like, okay, you know, these people will love me, these won't, but, you know, go hard in on the ones that do, and don't be afraid of annoying the ones that don't. But I guess that's what a true brand is, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you have to stand for something in life, right? So might as well stand for things you believe in, and everything we stand for is positive, right? And what you start to see is that whenever somebody throws negativity at you, it's more about them than it is about you. You said this, you did this, that makes me feel this way because of this experience I've had in my life. I'm still holding on to XYZ, whatever. I'm going to project that onto you. you can't blame anybody for that. That's humanity. That's life. That's how it is. So you do know that when you see that reaction, you're being evocative and you're channeling a deep emotion that is core to a lot of people. And so those people that are working through their emotion eventually will become fans once they figure out what they're going through. And that's always been my view from day one, is like, I would rather stand for something and, you know, pass away broke than stand for nothing and pass away a billionaire.
One of the things about marketing that's always interested me, particularly about big consumer, I'll call them consumer fashion brands, is the sort of distribution strategy. So, you know, particularly when you're selling a premium product, I guess it can be quite tempting that you have lots of people that want to carry the product and sell it all around the world. But I suppose without that marketing component that accompanies it, that story, you know, it can just be seen as, you know, it could just be easily lost in terms of what it is, and maybe someone in the local market can sort of figure some version out, do a better job at marketing, and then this is almost like the second but just more expensive one that people don't fully get. So how do you sort of expand the business and get that balance between kind of who you are and the story, so that people kind of, you know, connect that with what could arguably be called a commodity?
For sure. We're very, very product driven, right, in terms of our seeding strategy. But to your point, a lot of what we do is brand oriented in our messaging. And so I think it's very similar to a Red Bull in strategy, is that you have to build enough critical mass and then just absolutely flood the market. But the brand value is what keeps you from becoming commodities. So then everything else in the market, even if it's trying to do what you do, you know, albeit not as well, it's not going to seem like the real thing. There's going to be some market of people that is not looking for the real thing. They're looking for the cheaper version of the real thing. That's fine. That's always going to exist. And I think it's a mistake to try and get out of your lane. But for us, again, this is a $1 trillion market, right? Like, there's enough room for us to build a great business and a great brand that is making an impact, and we can stay ourselves in the process. Whatever size of business that becomes, that's what size of business it is, you know. And then you go into other products, and then you get more complex with the way that, you know, you start to build things out. But I think that when you can build identity with people right off the bat early, it's more meaningful than leading with a product benefit. And it's because people receive information and react emotionally, but the logic that they use when they read the product benefits, when they read the you know, the specifics or the science or the data or whatever, that's just rationalizing what they initially felt. So if initially they feel, hey, this is something I resonate with, then we've already won that customer over. Then the rest of it is more just testing and communications and messaging, right? It's just basic kind of marketing 101 of how do we tweak this and test copy and test imagery. But when you hit them emotionally and connect with them right off the bat, that's what so many people struggle to do. And there's very few brands that do that even to this day. And brands that do that struggle to stay that way for a long period of time.
So is it for you brand first then? You know, if you're going into a new area where you are unknown, do you have to, you know, get that in and then, you know, the product distribution follows? Or
100%. I think that brands are really, really important in our society, because brands are how people identify what they stand for, how they identify values, and how they signal values, more importantly. So if someone's wearing Patagonia, I know that they're very environmentally focused. I know that they're probably going outdoors and hiking on the weekend. I know, you know, a lot about them just by seeing that emblem on the vest or whatever they might be wearing, right? And at the end of the day, if you can stand for something for a community, that to me is infinitely more valuable than the product you make. Because the product you make, sure, a lot of people can use it. But when you stand for something, you can make 1 million products for that community, and they will still want to signal with your brand, right? And I think we see that with Nike, where the quality of their products over time has not really improved relative to the market, but people who wear Nike want to signal that they're a Nike like customer, right? That's what's so powerful about brands. And in our society, we all look for ways to signal who we are. And if we lived in a world with less of that kind of very evocative branding, we wouldn't really know what to wear, what to do. And there's a lot of people who want to over rationalize things in our society, but at the end of the day, we're very emotional creatures. You know, we're very communal, and we want to fit in with others like us. And brands are a very, very powerful way that we help to identify who we are.
So if you went back around the clock, back 4 years, you had your product, you'd invented it, but you weren't able to raise the money you wanted, and you were committed to go out and make this product a success. From a marketing perspective, what would be kind of like the number one, I guess, way or strategy that you would use to, you know, with the limited budget that you would use to sort of get that out there as a first step?
For sure. The bootstrapping in you know, our industry, I think, is relatively easy. If you have a product you can afford to at least have some of. For this product specifically, I would have probably started with a tight community like CrossFit, something that's super passionate, and a community where you can easily connect with people. They're very, very kind. They're very, very open. But CrossFit, as well as a market, once they adopt the product, everybody adopts it, right? And I would go to every CrossFit gym. I would go once a week to every major gym in whatever city I was in, and I would set up a little stand. I would sell socks. I would explain them. I would make friends with the instructors. I would ask them to wear them. You know, I would do all of that's what builds a brand anyway. Even with money raised, that's still what we do, is like the boots on the ground approach. Yeah. But that is far more effective than a lot of people realize. And, you know, paid ads is great, right? Doing all of the partnerships, doing all sorts of other strategies, getting distribution is great. But if you don't put in the work to be a part of the community, they can smell that a mile away when they see your brand, because you're not authentic. You're not core to the community.
Yeah. I think that's a really wonderful lesson. Maybe we'll even create a clip on that, because, you know, we've had a number of products over the years and tried different ways to promote them. We've been going 22 years now. And I think you're right. You know, the times where you go out, you speak to customers, you give them the first prototype, they give you feedback, you make some changes, you go back to them. And as difficult and as painful as it is, you know, sometimes it's easier just to say, okay, let's get some money and pay someone to promote it. You know, you put a big ad in everywhere. But I think you're right. You know, it takes a lot of effort and personal effort from people that, like yourself, at running the company, that I think they like to hear from, as opposed to kind of subbing it out and get some, you know, school leaver to go and do that. I think you're right. It's so underdone now. You know, you don't really see that happening a lot.
Yeah.
But I agree with what you're saying. You know, extremely powerful if you can pull that off.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, if it's a product that is actually valuable to that community, you'll know immediately too, right? If you're selling something that maybe isn't going to resonate, it's a lot cheaper to actually get down there and figure it out quickly, as opposed to put a lot of money behind a marketing budget and find it out the expensive way.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, make a lot of products. I think I've done all of those, made all those mistakes over the years. So it's quite nice to hear what you're saying. Is like, you know, do what you do when you started, when you didn't have any money, and you won't go too far wrong. So what are some of the key lessons, I suppose, that you've learned since starting the business that you didn't anticipate, or challenges, you know, lessons via challenges that you didn't anticipate were likely to come in front of you?
So the biggest thing for me was just being able to separate money from really the core of what business building and brand building is, which is a very emotional thing that speaks to a deeper, more animalistic nature, whereas money is a more superficial, measurable thing. And in our society, you know, we have kind of a few things that we do. One, we rationalize business and we create these structures of thought. So you have your email marketing, you have your agencies, you have your, you know, paid ads, and all of these are so measured, and there's these clear strategies that are built out. And a lot of people think that being able to market, for example, would be checking all the boxes of, okay, I have a paid ad strategy, I have an email strategy, I have a social strategy. But really, it's missing the point of what's really going on at the core, which is that we're taking a whole lot of people, orienting them a certain way in terms of how they make their lifestyle decisions. That is a much more carnal thing, and it requires you to separate the financial from really what your intuition is and gut is telling you about how people work and how people think. And for me, when I got into entrepreneurship, there were a lot of paths I could have taken, but I got into it because I wanted to really have no ceiling on my growth as an individual. And it's been a blessing because I have had so many failures, mistakes, and learnings along the way that it has really taught me to connect deeper with myself as an individual, understand who I am and how I work, and through deeper introspection and reflection and understanding how you make decisions and really what makes you tick, getting through your programming, you start to really understand how to speak to other people. And it's the same language, but it sounds completely different. The way that you speak about a product or a brand, once you start to really understand what resonates with you at a deep level.
That's interesting. So I get the personal attachment. I'll come back to that in a minute in terms of, your lessons with money, but how do you do that from a business? Because I guess at some point, the numbers have to add up and you've got bills to pay and you have to hit sales targets. So how do you, in terms of your mind as a leader of the business, how do you think about that in terms of your key objectives without sort of allowing the money to, which is a central part of it, but distort what you've just mentioned there? For sure.
I think, from the way I approach it from a day-to-day standpoint, it's always about how can we be iterative about this, right? And the way you start, we started saying, hey, these socks have XYZ benefits. And now it's, these socks help you move better. That's totally different because we went from explaining something technical and something that the rational mind would receive to something that's more engaging, more of a hook and more of an emotional connection, because move better, live better, run faster, jump higher, carry more weight, give more piggyback rides to your kid, whatever that might be, right? If you can anchor it to something that's actually meaningful to the individual and what benefit they'll actually take away from it, then you have their attention, you could explain. So if I say, to a 55-year-old man, hey, you just had a grandkid, you probably have some sore ankles right now, sore feet from, you're aging, it's hurting. And if you buy these socks, you're going to be able to play with your kids longer every day. You're going to be able to play with your grandkid when they're 10, when they're 15, when they're 20, and still be active because you wear these socks. And you're going to be able to live a full life with your family and not have to stay at home because your feet hurt, and not have to feel injured, and not have to feel like you're aging out of really being able to live. That's an incredible benefit you can provide to somebody. And to be able to make somebody feel and understand that that's really what the product is doing is not a technical thing, and it's not related to money. And from a financial standpoint, I think to your point just earlier, it's more of a personal issue than it is a business issue, because in the business you're really focused on how do we communicate this emotion, right? The money follows that because the money is a part of the transaction to be able to get to that outcome. But the person's kind of in status A and they want to be in status B, and you show them how they bridge that gap. So
the primary goal really in what you've said, so I can just get my head around it, is your mission is like, look, if I get these on your feet, this is, I'm excited about what that can do for a lot of people, and being successful at that goal, as an example, will deliver as a secondary result, will deliver what the investment and the business needs to survive and to continue to do that more successfully. Is that
100%? And there's definitely things you need to be able to do in a sophisticated way to make money, right? You can't have bad distribution. You can't have bad operations. There's fundamentals to business that need to exist. But I usually find that, especially for most people who are starting a business or trying to get something off the ground, it's not practical to worry about the systematic side of business. It's more practical to focus on the core of what you're doing. And then I feel that the systematic side kind of reveals itself to you. But if you approach it in an overly structured way where you already have preset concepts of here's kind of the rough outline of a marketing department, then you're constrained to think in that way. And one of my big beefs with society these days is we have this belief that if you don't have data and if it's not measurable, then it's not valid. And that could not be further from the truth. And it leads us to create strategies that are only measurable. So already, because you want to measure the outcomes so much, you've limited your thinking to only tools that can be measured.
So what would be an example of not doing that then, or doing that and not doing that, so I can sort of keep up with you?
Yeah, for sure. So if I were to approach, say, our general paid ad strategy, right? that is a channel that can be measured. So if I'm thinking about what's going to sound great to the VC, well, my CPA is going to sound really great. My LTV is going to sound really great, right? But that could lead me to put the entirety of my focus into a paid ads effort, where it might make more sense for me to do some community building, and through that community building, place the product into various, locations. Let's say we'll use that CrossFit example of different CrossFit gyms, let's say, or even the pickleball community, becoming active there, showing up to the events. The amount of revenue we drive from pickleball communities is so not correlated to the dollars we spend on pickleball ads. And they're completely different. The dollars we spend on pickleball ads are almost minimal relative to our other advertising. And it's because we do the work, we show up to the community, and we're there. And that's an action that's not measurable. You just have to trust that when you lead with your heart and you focus on actually what you're trying to do, which is cultivate community and show people what a product can do for them, that it's going to tie back on the revenue side. And that's not something that, you can actually know beforehand. You just have to be bold enough to go screw it up. And we screwed it up a bunch of times. You know what I mean? Like that's how it is. Or even on the ad side of things, another example would be many people want to go with an agency or a content team that's been proven already. But that's kind of a fallacy to me because it doesn't really correlate to the market you're advertising to. So one of our best performing ads, we went and found an influencer who makes these hilarious basketball videos. And he made this just absolutely hilarious video of him. He crosses somebody over, dunks the basketball.
Was it a Bone Crusher?
It wasn't Bone Collector. It was actually another guy called
sorry.
Elite Life KD. And he's hanging from the rim, and someone puts socks up that are meant to look like his feet, but their hands are in them, and it's clearly their hands, and they're doing this. And it's so funny. That ad does so well for us. And that's not something that data will ever tell you. And that's not a guy who's really ever made an ad for another brand before. But it was just something we knew in our hearts was hilarious. We thought it was awesome. We thought it was on brand, and it resonated. And there's just so many of those decisions you can't justify them. You just have to trust your instinct and your gut.
Yeah, which is difficult when I guess it's difficult in a business when you have for a while had that structure and then try to sort of go down the direction that you have. Do you think that that's something that you have to do when you form it, and it's like, look, this is how we're going to build the business around these these different ideas, or do you think you can evolve into doing that, going in that direction?
I think that's a good place when you're early, right? And I think over time you find ways to measure the unmeasurable. So, you do that campaign, you start to get kind of a broader scope from a time perspective, and you can start to evaluate, okay, so these types of approaches, we'll call them, strategy A. What's the outcome of strategy A? How can we do more things in strategy A in different markets? And what is making strategy A? Is it the fact that, this is the basketball market? Is it the fact that it's humorous? Is it the fact that, it's a minute long? It's 30 seconds long? Like, is it the fact that it's shot on an iPhone instead of a professional camera? There's so many variables that go into that. But if you start by focusing too much on the variables, you miss kind of the opportunity to come in almost blind, almost like an amateur, and have that passion from the community perspective, right? Like when you're a customer, you're always saying, I whenever I watch an ad on TV or friends are around, it's like, oh man, they should have done that in that ad. That would have been so much funnier. You lose that connection to the brand when you're overly using your rational brain in the ideation process. It's actually super funny that we're talking about this because literally today I gave one of my colleagues a assignment, and I'm trying to kind of shift his thinking in the same way. It's like, dude, you're super smart, you're super brilliant. I want you to not use any of that. I want you to use the total other side of your brain, and then trust that your brilliance will give you the solution. So spend all of your effort trying to understand the problem better and trying to understand what's really happening here, and just know that the idea that comes to your head is going to be the right idea because you're that smart. And so many people have trouble understanding or having that faith in themselves that the idea they come up will be good, that they spend so much time focusing on the idea, so little time focusing on the problem and the circumstance. And that I think that's really maybe a better way to phrase the bigger concept.
Yeah. Have you seen or had experiences of both types of companies? The ones like you are, where you're just sort of trying to almost like break rules and go in a slightly different direction, and the more traditional ones, which are very much start with the numbers and sort of everything works back from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I've done it wrong for so many years that when I flipped the switch and I saw things work, that's what makes me have so much conviction around this way of thinking, is that I'm a guy who's been fortunate to be able to grasp concept and ideas really quickly. And so I can sit down and, we're talking about all the paid ad stats. We built a model. We ran that strategy. We did all the testing. We did everything to the T, essentially perfectly executed of that model, minus focusing so much on what we put through the mechanism. And I think we focus so much in society on what is the distribution mechanism, whether it's content, whether it's B2B, right? Whether it's, Nike just pulled back all their stores in Europe. I don't know if you saw this, from like 3,500, I think, stores down to 300 or something like that. Maybe even 35,000 down to 300. It was a huge, huge shrinkage over COVID. Great for their profit margins, right? Great move from a business standpoint. Those types of moves are not valuable to even worry about when you're a startup. It's just not relevant. Like, the amount of impact that'll make on your business is minimal. We spend so much time trying to be brilliant business minds and think of stuff like that we forget at the early stages, you're still starting the fire. You start the fire by just rubbing two logs together over and over and over again. And then eventually it gets big enough that you have to think of more sophisticated ways to grow it, balance it, and make sure things are under some sort of system of management. And those systems of management really just come, in my opinion, a lot later than we think they do.
Yeah. So what does success mean to you then?
It's happiness. That's the whole goal. It's happiness and alignment. So I think, for me, we're all here to play a unique role in society. We all have different orientations, personalities, and just vibes that help us do certain things. And so, we talked about Oliver earlier. I could not and would not want to live Oliver's life, and he could not and would not want to live mine. But that's a very beautiful thing, right? Is to recognize that each person has a very, very unique role and purpose on this planet. And leaning into your uniqueness is, to me, the number one way to find fulfillment. And so fulfillment, to me personally, is that success. And then from that fulfillment is the byproduct of the business success, because when you're fulfilled, you're happy. When you're happy, you're nice to everybody, and you're uplifting, and you're positive. And when people work with uplifting and positive people, they want to work with them more. And there's so many of these little, patterns you see when you start to make the change in yourself. Like, I remember earlier on, I used to be a lot more in my head. I used to be a lot more nervous. I used to be a lot more insecure. And knowing how that didn't really work for me, it didn't really resonate. And as I found myself, as I got a lot happier, it was like exponentially more impactful. Any room I showed up to, any sort of deal that I wanted to do, any sort of athlete I want to talk to, whatever, if I just come in and I'm being myself, I've found that just because I'm really focused on maintaining my balance, being positive, being uplifting, and giving as much as possible to the people around me, that makes people want to work with me. And
how did you make that shift from inside your head to to just being who you are and not really caring about what people think?
That's a good question. Tons of meditation, which I'm sure you're on too as well. I journal every day in the morning, so that helped me to find some reflection. I have a therapist that I run stuff back and forth with, and I'm like probably the only guy that does this, but I come in with notes every week. Like, okay, here's what I want to work on. I have this tendency, Explain to me why, help me understand why, and help me understand if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And I'm very, very, analytical about how my mind works. And then finally, understanding that this world is kind of in two parts. We have a man-made world, and we have the world around it that we exist within. And understanding that I am a part of the world around it, and I can choose to participate in different elements of the man-made world. Money is an element of the man-made world. Social media is an element of the man-made world. Fame, attention, all of the things that our society here is fixated on achieving, it's all stuff that somebody made. And there's a point where you look around, you say, you know what? Just because some guy or some girl in the past thought that this was the way something should be done or something, should work, doesn't mean I'm going to. And just having the confidence to reinvent my idea of, what my life should be and is, that's kind of where the fulfillment came from.
And you mentioned about money that it took you to have to sort of almost like be without it to be able to sort of accept that it wasn't important to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go on, sorry.
Yeah, the process with unplugging from money, one of my mentors said this to me. He does all of his financials in yen. He's like, those numbers mean nothing to me, so I don't feel anything emotional if it's going up or down. He's just like, cool. Like,
he's here and he does.
He's here, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's here, yeah. So just because it has no context to him, and that was an important thing to hear from him. And he also told me when he went from college into his professional life, he changed his name. His name was Joseph, went by Joe. He changed it to JP. And he's like, I changed it because, shout out JP if you're listening. I changed it because it helped me to redefine my identity and start from scratch. And it's funny because we carry so much baggage and we carry so much, history with us that we always want to prove someone wrong from something they said in the past or felt about us or whatever experience we went through. And there's a point where it's just like, yeah, none of that really matters. Like there's just how we are in this present moment, how we interact with the people around us. And when you free yourself of the weight of all of the things you're carrying, life becomes very joyous, and things like money, stress, all of that start to really fall off into the wayside because you realize like things find you, things are around. And as you get more observant to how much you can actually do in the current moment, your ability to create impact and to grow businesses and to get alignment out of people goes up so much because it's not about you anymore. You actually truly assess the problem and solve it from an objective place.
Fantastic. Well, we could go on, but we are running out of time. So I've got one more question for you. Escape Your Limits is about escaping what you've believed is impossible and gone on to make possible. What would be an example of where you've escaped your personal limits?
I think for me, a big one was living in LA, moving to Orange County, actually. It's something I did recently. And I had always just been super locked into this idea of, trying to get to higher and higher heights, if you will, from a kind of business, almost like social ladder standpoint. I hate to say it like that because it makes me feel bad about myself, but yeah, not in the negative way. I'm not going to judge myself, but I was very motivated for a long time around wanting to be seen as, an equal mind to many of the people I respected or admired, right?
I guess that's natural for someone that's an achiever. And
100%. And that was a huge limitation on me, really? Because I was doing everything to be recognized as intelligent or as successful or, you name it, cool, whatever. And the second I just let it all go and said nothing this has kind of been the thematic element of today, but nothing that someone else controls is going to affect my reality. My reality is defined by me. My happiness is defined by me. And I choose to measure my happiness through things I control and measure my life through things I control. All of a sudden, it's like, I heard this quote, you can either chase or you can be chased. And it was like my whole life flipped. I was chasing for so long. All of a sudden, I just stopped. And everything felt like it was chasing me.
That's incredible. It's an easier thing to explain than to live.
Yeah.
My guess is that takes quite a lot of practice, like you say, on a regular basis. But it's a lovely place to be. If you can actually get to that point in your life. I think that's one of the things that we probably, myself included, I can resonate with what you've said. And I'm sure many people listening can also. You want to get on life, you want to be successful and achieve and prove other people that you're better than what you used to be. And I suppose we all have our insecurities as well that we're trying to fill through that. But it's how long did it take you to kind of be able to drop that and to kind of be this sort of new version of yourself?
Yeah, I mean a decade and counting, right? I mean, still not. I'm still not perfect by any means. Still have my flaws. I still piss people off, and my colleagues, and they'll give me crap for it in the most loving way. But I think that as you start to make that progress on yourself, and I don't know if it's just aging, if it's just kind of biological and things get easier as you get older, less hormones, less of that in your brain. But for me, it's just consistent work. And there was a point where I really feel like there was a switch flip, and it went from more things in my life were negative to more things in my life were positive. And that was the moment it like accelerated the other way. And I tend to believe that there's this spectrum, from negativity to positivity. The further negative you are, the harder it is to get out of that. And, that's just how it is. But once you get to the middle and flip, it's easier and easier and easier every day to get more and more positive and loving and caring of others. And so, it's a journey, but I think that's what we're here for, is to go through that.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Matthew.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.